All right, thanks for allowing us to start a little bit late. First order of business is I'd like to approve the minutes to the April 1st meeting. Is there anything noteworthy in the minutes that you want to object to? All right, can I get a motion to approve the April 1st meeting minutes?
So moved.
All right, can I get a second? Second by Golis. All in favor? All right, unanimous, thank you. Okay, before we get rolling, I just wanted to allow the opportunity for the public to make any comments on anything that's not on the agenda tonight. Just gonna scan the room. Doesn't appear that we have any, but I'd like to make a few starting remarks. So as y'all know, the work of the Radnor Planning Commission is, it's largely regulated by the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. And also, we work at the pleasure of the Board of Commissioners. Our job is really to advise them on zoning, planning, land development, but it doesn't mean that we're completely relegated to be reactive to applications and submissions, or even once every 10 years when our comprehensive land use plan comes up for renewal or revision or an update. So during our February 5th meeting, our commissioner and also former chair, Matt Golis, gave us a presentation to educate us on transit-oriented development. And out of that, Commissioner Kim also was able to identify and help apply for a $100,000 grant opportunity for us to study transit-oriented development in the context of the Downtown Wayne Master Plan. So I'm pleased to announce that the DVRPC, who's the grant-making authority, did approve Radnor for that $100,000 grant, largely because of the work of these two gentlemen. So please join me in congratulating them both and with our thanks. So hopefully, in the same spirit of continuing community education, we're also going to hear from the Radnor Conservancy tonight. They're going to be speaking to us about bird strikes and bird-friendly building codes that are designed to prevent those. Certainly, our native and migratory birds will thank us, hopefully. That being said, let's transition to the bread and butter of tonight's meeting. Application 211488, 270 Bryn Mawr Avenue, Western Development. And Mr. Falcone, before you get rolling, I do want to make a disclosure that I recently engaged the applicant's law firm, Saul Ewing, on an unrelated matter. So the firm has 17 offices, 400 attorneys, and it's important to note that I didn't engage the applicant's attorney, David Falcone, nor do I have any dealings with him on this matter. There's a different attorney that's representing me on a completely different matter. I did disclose this potential conflict to both the firm and the Planning Commission solicitor. Both found there was no issue, but felt that I should disclose it on the record. Also, while the applicant is setting up, I want to give context to our viewing public or the present public on where we are with this application. Applicant here tonight is for land development, having resolved their zoning and other issues by virtue of settlement agreement that that was executed with the township on October 17th of last year. So the settlement agreement stipulates 16 different conditions, and these conditions augment the requirements of our Radnor Code. We're looking through that settlement agreement through the lens of land development tonight. And since that settlement agreement was executed, various Planning Commission members have taken advantage of 2 site meetings with the applicant. The first one was on March 25th of this year, and also April 22nd. And just to pause briefly on the subject of site visits, I want to commend the applicant for their transparency in inviting us to review the project They've been very helpful. They're an optional opportunity. In other words, they didn't have to provide that opportunity to us, but it definitely educated us on the project. It was great. Great opportunity for the Planning Commission to clarify exactly what was going on, and certainly the things that we were seeing in the plans. That being said, I want to encourage every developer that's either before us tonight or anytime in the future to engage with us in this way, especially on large-scale projects such as this. So finally, applicant was also scheduled to meet with us on April 1st. They requested to table at that time in order to tighten up some minor drafting issues, and now they're in front of us seeking our recommendation for preliminary, and I'm assuming final land development approval. Please take it away.
Thank you. So there's actually not much to add. You did a great job. You stole my job tonight, MJ, which is fantastic. But we have submitted the plans. As you said, we were supposed to be here earlier. We tabled that meeting to come back, tighten up the plans. It has been submitted pursuant to the terms of the settlement agreement, which, as you've outlined, really, although that kind of evolved from the zoning process, it addressed many things that you would sometimes consider and look at during the land development process. So we, as part of that settlement agreement, we submitted plans that were attached, and these plans, which have been submitted to the township and reviewed by your consultants, really dovetail very closely with those plans. And that drives the number of units on the site, the number of parking spaces, access points, disturbance of steep slope areas, number of parking spaces, size of parking spaces, height of building, facade of building, width of building, lots of things that, again, drive the placement and the size and scale of this building. So while we are absolutely willing to discuss any of those things tonight, I just want to kind of educate the public who might be listening. A lot of what you see is derived as part of a process that was negotiated with the Board of Commissioners with the guidance of staff. So I think the most important thing for us to do tonight is probably walk through your consultant letters, see what issues are out there and how they've been addressed. I do know that one issue that's come up recently is some parking discussion about some structural concerns. I should note that the garage itself is overparked by more than 40 spaces. So working with staff, we are confident that we can clean up any what I would describe as kind of unusable or kind of not advantageous parking spaces and not drift at all towards what we would need to supply for parking. We would still be well in excess of what's desired. However, due to, I guess, the language of the code, there is no distinction between internal garage kind of access ways and widths and general access widths. We have added to our list of waivers a waiver to allow the structural columns to remain as they are. They really can't move from a structural perspective, and then move forward with that as it is. But I'll leave that to the expert. I'm not. And I'll turn it over to our engineer who can walk through.
Before you do that,
yeah, sure,
Mr. Falcone, with respect to condition, I guess, I don't remember if they were numbered in the settlement agreement. Condition J, which was a stipulation that there would be a crosswalk across South Bryn Mawr Avenue.
Yes.
I do believe that was pending PennDOT approval.
That's correct.
Did that get approved?
So we have some more information on that. The location that we had intended initially to install it, they've said maybe that's not the best location, but we are intending to move it kind of down Bryn Mawr Avenue, I guess, away from like the Wawa down. So moving it, what is that, south maybe, on Bryn Mawr Avenue to line up more with the access point coming from across the street to the residential development. So we are still proposing that crosswalk, as was in the settlement agreement, but we've been advised to move it a little bit. So that's what we're showing on the plan.
Okay, just wanted an update.
Yep. So
got it.
That's that.
Okay, so whoever is going to speak after, I guess, if we can walk through the two review letters, starting with Gannett Fleming.
Hi, Chris Pazzinas from Bowler Engineering, civil engineer on this project. We can start with the Gannett Fleming letter, like you said. So I'm just going to skip to page 4 where the comments start. The first comment is about sewer planning. We are in the process of working through that and getting sign-offs from everybody. It will require a full planning module. We're waiting for the connection management plan to be approved, which we anticipate to happen this month, in which case we'll start the rest of the process for component 3 sign-offs. So we're confident, based on the information we have, that sewer is available. It will just be a paperwork exercise from this point forward. The first comment in zoning has to do with buffers. So the requirement in the code is for a 20-foot wide buffer, or we can deviate from that, which is really what we're doing. So along the property line here, we're showing trees, which will be part of the buffer. Working with staff, we enhance some of the buffering in front of the building, and then it also continues a little bit further north along the property line. The comment in here, as I understand it, is just that we can't double count some of the tree requirements for replacement and other items within the buffer, and we can do that. There's enough room on site to plant.
Before we get further along on this, you met with Shade Tree, correct?
There was one meeting with Shade Tree, yes, and we're going back again.
Okay. And what was the status of that meeting?
There was just some questions about different tree counts and what they counted for. We actually have this plan, although a little difficult to see, has different colors which represent the different requirements. The orange is the buffering that I spoke about. The green is for tree replacement. Red is for planting along Bryn Mawr for street trees. So we're showing that we meet all the requirements separately, and this is what's going to be presented at the Shade Tree.
There was some contention about, I don't want to characterize it as contention. There was some question about 16 trees approximately, and you feel that you can make those up?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
The next comment in the Gannett Fleming letter is regarding the sign at the entrance and just complying with zoning, so we will comply with that section. For subdivision land development, the first comment is about the waiver for preliminary final, so we're requesting a waiver for preliminary final approval. The second one is for showing all features within 500 feet. Again, we're requesting a waiver from that, and we are providing an aerial image instead. The third comment is about right-of-way width. We're providing the required 40-foot half width. The fourth comment, again, has to do with buffer screening and the planting. And it was deferred to the township to find that acceptable. The fifth comment just has to do with the fee, which the applicant acknowledges and agrees to.
So you're choosing the fee, correct?
Correct.
Okay, got
Yes.
it. And I guess the building size, the square footage of the structure, TBD?
We have this detailed plans of it, so we know that. It's around 155,000 square feet or so.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you.
So then we move on to stormwater comments. We did submit for our MPDS permit, so we're working on further detailing these. Comment 1 and 2, they're both will comply. And then on the last page, sanitary sewer, there's just a note on the plan that needs to be changed to Radnor Township rather than Radnor Township Sewer Authority. And then the last comment has to do with the parking garage layout. There was some communication today. Again, as was stated, we are over parked. There's 118 parking spaces required. We are showing 163 in total between surface parking and the garage, so we're confident that we can eliminate spaces that are in close proximity to columns or walls that make it difficult to get in and out of, and still have enough parking to remain compliant with the zoning requirements.
I don't want to go out of turn, but on the Gilmore letter, one second. There was definitely a healthy discussion about parking facilities, and we'll get there. I know you're replacing existing parking, and we certainly get that. But the new parking requirements, since you are overparked, I was just curious. The new parking requirements, if you were to put in a brand new parking lot, has landscaping reservation and trees. I think 2.5 inches of DBH for every 5 spaces or every 10 spaces, depending on what the configuration is. Have you considered maybe doing that to have a more visually friendly plan? And certainly, it probably would require less impervious.
Chris, can you put the other plan back up that shows the? Yeah, this is the area that you're talking about that's basically, it's an existing parking lot today. We're rebuilding in kind. We're also essentially doing the same thing along this.
Mr. Meyer, could you just state your name for the
Sure,
record?
I'm Michael Mayer with Western Development. So there's 2 areas, actually there's 3 areas we're talking about, the parking. The 2 parking garage levels that Chris just spoke about, that's not on the plan. And then you have this area here we call the horseshoe. And I think what you're really referring to is this lot. Sure, I think we can look at that, and you're asking for additional islands what is the code? Is it?
It's not a request. I think, from my standpoint, it would just be more visually attractive. It would add to the tree canopy, probably add to the shading of the cars.
I would like to just chime in from a shade tree perspective. If you do that in this parking lot, take a look at South Wayne parking lot. Because we designed a plan where we didn't put trees in that were not going to make it because they were just locked in asphalt. So we used a lot of crepe myrtles, a lot of grasses. So I think if you're going to go down that path, do it right, because I don't want to see a bunch of oak trees in asphalt because they're not going to make it.
Sure.
And we can worry about the canopy somewhere else, as far as I'm concerned. but
And
not-
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one thing to that. Both of those parking areas will have subsurface stormwater facilities underneath them, so it's not the best place to really put a tree that's going to grow rather large. It'll grow into that system.
Yeah, again, not a formal request, just looking for your input, perhaps.
Do note it, yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. All right, sorry to knock you off track, but
That's okay.
I guess we're on the Gilmore letter.
Yeah. So again, on page 2, that starts with the waivers. On page 3, the first comment is about the access easement. So there's a cross-access easement with the Proclamation Church to the west. I believe that everything is finalized with that. It's being modified as it came through the existing entrance and will now be through the new entrance, and allows for our circulation with trucks and deliveries and a temporary grading easement that's needed. So we can provide a copy of that once all documents are executed. I will skip over some of the traffic comments that are specific. Sandy can speak to those. And then, again, comment 5 has to do with the parking facilities in the garage. So, as I said, we have to add some additional detail. We know that there's some spaces of concern that we can eliminate, and I think we can address all of these issues that are raised and work it out with staff as we further detail the plans.
Can we talk about under saldo, comment, page 3, comment 4B, the pedestrian path?
Mm-hmm. So This is in the southwest corner, so this area here. We can move a ramp if that is what is preferred. The way that we designed this was due to the existing parking lot not having ADA spaces. We added spaces there that could be used in addition to the ones shown in the horseshoe.
Okay, got it. Commissioners, what questions do you have? All right.
I have one. You've heard this question before, Mike. At the end of the shade tree meeting, I made a notation with the amount of trees going in here, the amount of, just be careful with all the infrastructure that's around, that could be around those trees, because I don't know where it is by looking at the plans exactly, but it'd be a shame to lose a bunch of trees just because they got planted in the wrong place. So there's some kind of way you can communicate with the people doing the trees and the people who know where all the underground infrastructure is. That'd be great. Sure.
Any other comments? All right, Mr. Phillips. What comments do you have?
I don't think I have anything to add other than what was discussed.
Okay. Let's, Mr. Drummond, let's hear from you. I think there's a vigorous discussion on parking,
Yeah,
garage.
my biggest concern is the parking garage and the circulation within the parking garage. There's columns that seem to be blocking the circulation that will need to be resolved. It sounds like they're going to try to resolve that and then work with us to make sure it's done in an appropriate manner.
Okay, but at this point, you have yet to see that.
I have not seen, the revised plan today that I saw we still have a lot of concerns with that.
Okay, gotcha. Mr. Norsini.
So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So there's some smaller issues with the plans that have to be addressed. You know, we talked about some plantings, the ADA crosswalk, what Mr. Drummond's concerned with. But procedurally, Shade Tree Commission on June 26th, I'm assuming? Is that when you're going to appear next to get that straightened out? We have the planning module, the NPDES permit, right, from the state yet. We need a copy of the executed easement agreement with the changes and the parking garage. So the sewage facilities planning module and the NPDES permit are going to go hand in hand. You're not going to get one without the other. So I guess in my mind, Mr. Chairman, we need to see the plan items addressed and given our consultant, Damon Drummond, time to review. As far as Shade Tree Commission, that's great. That's on its own path. The sewage facilities planning module, the NPDES permit, they're not going to get in time, nothing that would come back to this commission. So that's going to be something I would assume is going to go to the board when they go to them. But my request is that all these plan items get cleaned up so that when it does go to the board, there is a clean review letter all the way through. There's no hanging chads.
Solicitor, could you tell us about the BOC review process on this? I mean, are we doing caucus and then?
I believe the caucus is specific, the settlement agreement specifically states the caucus is going to be skipped. So normally, the BOC has a two-step process, 2 meetings, caucus, and then vote. This one, they're going straight to the vote.
Okay. So that being said, I mean, I don't want to hold you up, but I do believe that your parking facilities situation is, I understand you're overparked, but we're just not there on the underground garage. I'd rather see a cleaner review letter on that. That's a substantial issue. Everything else, I think we believe that you will comply. I mean, those issues make a lot of sense. to resolve quickly, but I think we're just not there yet on the parking facilities.
So MJ, a question for you. On that parking, really, it kind of hinges on the location of those columns. Those columns can't move. So what we have to do is lose parking spaces. We're overparked, so we don't think that's going to be a problem. But then we need guidance from you and essentially a recommendation from you for that waiver so that we can have an 18-foot path. Kind of without that, nothing works under there because the width is the width, the columns are where they are, the outside of the building is where it is. There's not much flexibility we can have there. Where we do have the flexibility is in losing parking spaces. And so I think we did get some direction from Damon on some spaces we can lose. But when we come back, I think really what's going to be on the plan, you can correct me, but it's just going to have less parking spaces. Correct. There's nothing more that we can do there except lose parking spaces, which we will do. So obviously we will come back. If you want us to come back and see you again, I'm always happy to see all of you. It's, I don't, substantively to the plan, there will be no meaningful change other than less parking spaces. I'm maybe not explaining myself clearly. That's what it's going to be. We're going to sit down with Damon and we're going to say, all right, what spaces should we lose? And they're just going to go. So I don't.
I mean, Dave, I just don't, from my perspective, just in terms of how we behave all the time.
Yeah.
It's like you're coming before Shade Tree. Shade Tree had tabled you the last time, so you're coming for Shade Tree to get it done, and it will be done. But I hate to preempt Shade Tree. I just don't like it, and I think that it's 1 month.
I respect the process. More so than kind of asking for the recommendation tonight, I'm more trying to calibrate expectations when we come back. I don't want us to come back to you and you say, it's the same plan with less parking spaces.
Mr. Falcone, how would you like us to signal that to you? Would you like us to sort of nod and wink?
No, it's more.
And I'm not, this isn't a joke.
No.
I just want to.
I respect the process. I respect what you guys are doing. And I don't like to come back to a board and have them say to me, this is the same plan we've already seen it, you haven't done it. So I think what's going to happen is between today and the next time we come back to you, we're going to work with Damon. We're going to eliminate parking spaces. We will go back to Shade Tree. We'll show them the new plan. We're going to plant those extra 16 trees. We're just not going to argue about it. So then that'll clean that up. And I just want to make sure that you don't think we're thumbing our nose at your process by doing that.
I don't believe that anybody on this commission is acting in bad faith.
Okay. No, I don't think so either, yeah.
To jam you up on a technicality.
Yep.
But, I think the parking facilities discussion, even though on the record has not been that vigorous, I think the comments are significant enough for us to take a pause, and we're confident that you'll come back with a plan that works.
Yeah, we believe that as well.
I think due to the size of the project, and again, I'm going to commend you for being transparent and continuing to invite us in. We do have to be somewhat careful because there aren't as many speed bumps along the way.
Understood. And we know that the preliminary final process really is a quick moving process. So the extra time with you guys does help us get it right. So when we get to the board, we're there and we're done. So working with staff is great. We'll be back to see you guys. I want to calibrate the expectations when we come back, what you're going to see. And I think we'll get it right working with Damon and with Roger and Steve and all those folks.
I think there's no other conclusion other than you're going to lose parking, and we have that expectation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
All right. So,
Mr. Falcone, just real quick, so I'd sent an email to this effect today. So usually it's a 30-day requirement to submit to be back on the next meeting. Obviously, that means you would submit tonight.
Right.
Which is not possible. So if Bowler can wrap this up in about 2 weeks, right? That gives us, I gave a drop dead date in the email. Okay. We just need time to properly review this so we don't come here like we did tonight, right? It was a little last minute.
Okay.
So if Bowler can wrap this up in about a week and a half, which I'm sure you can, submit that, everything will be cleaned up, and then you're back on, so you're not going to lose a beat. You'll be back in the
Awesome.
July meeting.
Great. Well, I
Okay,
can
'cause,
promise for Bowler, they'll get that done.
I'm glad, because I'm sure Mr. Meyer would also promise for Bowler. And to follow on MJ's comments, Westrom has been very good to work with, right? So there's,
As have you guys, Steve. I should say, I thank staff and the Planning Commission for giving us all the time you guys have through this process. It's been helpful, and I think we're close. So I think we'll be able to get there.
And as a side benefit, I won't be there in July, so
July it is.
so better hurry. All right, so I guess we'll vote to table.
No other direction from the board other than what we've heard tonight? You think just clean those things up and be back? No other concerns or comments?
I think most of the work's been done by the BOC, and I think these are just last final items.
Okay.
Good luck at Shade Tree, and we're going to take I'm going to make a motion to table in the matter of application 211488, 270 South Bryn Mawr Ave. Motion to table. Can I get a second? Second by Brubaker. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Thank you.
Yeah, let me know.
See you in July. All right. Okay, folks. Next up is the lot consolidation application 212002786 Church Road, also known as Chanticleer. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Tim Davis, here from Shot Group, on behalf of our client, Chanticleer Gardens. We are here tonight presenting a lot consolidation plan. While lot consolidations are normally done in-house under staff review, the size of the subject parcel is large enough that it triggers land development to come in front of the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Commission. So we are here to present if you can get the whole thing on the screen. There are 3 parcels that we are proposing to consolidate into one large parcel. Currently, the Chanticleer Gardens owns all three parcels, and they will become part of one tax parcel entity. There's no development proposed as part of this application. On May 7th, a review letter was issued on the application for the lot consolidation. 3 of those comments will comply. There's to provide a deed for the new parcel, which we will do once approved, a title report, which the applicant will provide, as well as to revise the zoning table, which we will do. And that has to do with the 3 other comments that we are requesting waivers, as the review letter requests that we request waivers for 3 of the comments. Those 3 waivers are for the sections 255-20B1-1N, which is to outline man-made features within 500 feet, which we are requesting a waiver from. 255-22B1P, contour lines measured at vertical interval of 2 feet. Since there is no development, we are requesting a waiver. And also is quite a large property to survey at 2-foot interval for a lot consolidation. And then as well as 255-22B1R for large trees over 6 inches in caliper. Again, no development is required and no trees are impacted. And also it is a garden with a lot of trees.
Well, we certainly would love for you to comply with number 4, at least the tree lovers here. Commissioners, any comments?
Just more curious, like, why now? What prompted this?
I believe it was, so some of the lots were, they have been long since acquired and a formal survey had not been done of the overall parcels. Our firm undertook a whole lot survey of all of them, and we were able to correct some of those deed issues as a matter of course. Now that those are corrected, we're looking to consolidate them under one parcel.
Any further questions, comments? All right, so, Mr. Phillips?
I only have one question. I believe it's parcel C is under a different name with a different name trust. I assume that's somehow under the control, and that'll be reflected in the title report?
That's the plan, yeah. So that parcel C was purchased.
Can you speak
Yeah,
up? Mike?
please come up.
Sorry.
State your name.
My name's Brian Christ. I'm the facilities manager at Chanticleer. So parcel C was just purchased a few years ago. So that's the change in the name of that person that was on the board at the time. So the trust owns all three of the parcels, and that's the idea, is to consolidate them to one and get it all under one name for all those. Again, it's been kind of a nightmare trying to get anything done with like the different names on it. So that's basically one of the main purposes for it.
Sure. And I have no objection to the waivers that are being requested.
Okay, great. Any further staff comment? Mr. Norsini?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. So, hearing nothing, in the matter of application 212-002, 786 Church Road, I'm going to make a motion to recommend approval of the lot consolidation application. Can I get a second? Second by Kunda. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, and good luck. Thanks.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Okay. Next up, we've got ordinance number 2024-04. These are 7 zoning code amendments that are in front of us tonight. Before I ask for staff to lead us in, let's get some guidance on how this process is going to work. I'm going to assume that we are going to have a healthy discussion about these ordinance amendments, and I'm also assuming that we're not going to agree on all of them. Solicitor, how would you like us to dispense with these? There's 7 of them.
In order?
That's a great idea.
So-
A little bit more specific guidance. Are we voting on every single one of them, or?
No, I think, I mean, here's what normally would happen is you would recommend changes to each of the provisions, and then at the end, you do one vote. If the planning commission is so disjointed and disagrees over so many of the provisions, then yes, you could break them up, vote on each recommendation, that's perfectly fine. But if I think you should try to go through it and see if you can get a clear majority on the ordinance as a whole. That might give a clearer recommendation to the Board of Commissioners instead of doing it point by point by point.
Okay, got it. We shall try. All right. Staff, could you lead us in?
You want us to take you through each one of them, Mr. Fruman?
Well, we could do that. I have some questions on every one of them.
Can I just ask a question about order of information? So is there some reason that should we hear why this is coming before us? Can somebody explain why these 7 amendments have come before the Planning Commission and they're headed for the BOC? Just because, it sort of comes out of the blue for me. So I think if you're watching this on TV, you're like, wait a minute, the Planning Commission is considering 7 amendments to the zoning ordinance. How did this happen? Why did this happen? It just seems like that kind of preamble at the beginning might help.
Absolutely. So a lot of these provisions are things that were initiated at the commissioner's level that have been in the works over the last year or more. And as issues have been coming up, the commissioners have been identifying those through projects and just over the course of time, things that have been repetitive in nature that they want to take the opportunity to fix these in the short term, while ultimately the long-term plan, as this commission is well aware of, the township's currently going through their comprehensive plan rewrite. So a wholesale rewrite of the zoning ordinance is not appropriate at this point. But once we get through the comprehensive plan and have some idea of where the township is going to go in the next 10 years, that would be when it would be appropriate for the wholesale rewrite, reorganization of the zoning ordinance. But until then, we need to do some Band-Aids just to correct some of these things that have been just kind of nagging issues over the years that the commissioner wanted to, just kind of tighten up a little bit.
Okay. Thank you for that lead-in. So let's talk about each one by one, and hopefully we won't spend too much time on each one. But in the ordinance, Section 1, this is the revision, that's the portion of it that amends the definition of building height township-wide in all zoning districts. What's the rationale behind it? Could you paint us a picture?
What it basically separates out is commercial and residential. So it's allowing those structures that would normally have mechanicals on the roof, stair towers, elevator towers on the roof, to be treated differently in those different districts. So when you have a commercial building and those types of features are akin to a commercial building, they would be allowed. But we don't want to start seeing those creep into residential neighborhoods because it starts to create a massing issue and something that's now going to start encroaching into other properties in terms of massing. So if you can imagine a mechanical room or mechanical facility on top of a residential building that may have a flat roof on it, or a deck on top of a residential building that has a flat roof on it, stair towers. So those now things, you build your structure, your dwelling to the maximum building height, which is to the top of the roof, and now you're increasing that by putting a fence up there or you're putting mechanicals up there. Now that really starts to take advantage of a loophole and have a taller building. So it forces the residential buildings to stay within what is deemed to be the appropriate height for a residential district for those types of features.
So with this change, and I haven't examined the entire code here, but certainly there's an inconsistency here with C2. This is, if you look at 280-53.1B2C, where roof-mounted HVAC equipment shall be screened by use of a parapet wall or other building material that shall be included in the building height. We're talking about commercial buildings.
Yes. So there's provisions. That is one. You're going to see similar provisions in the WBOD, potentially in the Garrett Hill districts. And generally, when there are these built-in inconsistencies and they're throughout the code, there's language that, and it's in 280-53-1B, where it talks about where provisions of these regulations conflict with other zoning regulations, the following shall apply. So there are special exceptions that are actually built into the language of the code that allow those exceptions to be in those districts. So there's not an actual conflict. That conflict is actually worded out through the language of the code. So when there's more specific, and I'll use sign regulations as an example. There's WBOD has special sign regulations. Garrett Hill has special sign regulations. Those, if you read the definitions in those sections, they may be different than in the general definition sections for signs. That's okay because there's provisions that say these provisions, there's language that says these provisions in these districts apply specifically to these districts and overwrite any of the other ones. So while it would look like a perceived conflict, there's generally language in there that takes care of that.
Sure. And I don't want to jump into the weeds. We have other things to look at here. But is there a reason why in C2 this would be included and in other zoning districts it would not be?
In what terms of what being included?
The stair towers and...
C2 is our kind of the intermediary commercial zoning district. C1, C2, C3 is our most insensitive commercial district. So if it's in the, I believe that's in the town center where they're talking about a mix of residential and commercial. So you're going to have buildings that contain both. So that provision would be in there as you mix uses in buildings. The idea is to go up and not out, so you're, preventing sprawl on these lots, which are already tight. So that's probably why that provision's in there. It's been kind of a long-standing provision.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, section 2. This is a WBOD-related amendment, which removes parking requirements if there's on-street meter parking in close proximity to a proposed or expanded permitted use. How is close proximity defined? Is there?
It's not, and it's for that reason. We're trying to promote on-street parking. The differences between A and B is A is if you have an existing building, an existing site, and you either want to expand it, in case of a restaurant, add some more seats, or maybe a small addition on it, and there's parking on street. A lot of the businesses and properties in Wayne don't have extra land area to then start to pave over and add additional parking. They're already it's already built out area of the township. So they're disproportionately treated differently than, let's say, the C2 district or C1 district, where there may be a little bit more land area. So it's to push people to utilize those on-street parking spaces or those off-street parking lots that the township has, and still allow reasonable development and change of uses within the WBOD without undue burden to those businesses to go through the zoning process. So that's subsection A. Subsection B is, let's say you're going to scrape a site and redevelop it from the ground up. Now you have to then provide parking in accordance with the code.
Okay, got it. So let's talk about a scenario where there's a business that has no off-street parking today. They're obviously utilizing on-street parking as to satisfy the requirement in theory. If there is a change in capacity, they want to increase this, it's a restaurant, square footage, increase. In order for them to do that, they would have to get zoning review?
No, so the way the code is currently written, if you do not have any off-street parking, then you are to utilize on-street parking to the extent that it's available, with no checks and balances on that. However, if you have at least one off-street parking space, then any kind of change in use or expansion of that use that would trigger additional parking, you now need to provide that parking. Well, if you only have one parking space and there's no room to provide additional, now you have to then go to the zoning hearing board. So you could have two businesses, the exact same businesses, right next door to each other. One has one parking space, the other one has 0 parking spaces. They both want to expand to the same extent. One can do it as a matter of right, the other one would have to go to the zoning hearing board.
Okay.
Even though they're in the exact same situation.
So this obviously opens up the opportunity for businesses with off-street parking to not go in front of zoning, not go in front of us. Tell me a little bit about the history of any parking studies that may have been done in WBOD.
The last we can think is the early 2000s, which is obviously a long time ago. Wayne has changed and transformed dramatically since then. Mentioned earlier that there is a Wayne master plan that is going to be coming. Also talked about the comprehensive plan update, parking and the redevelopment of Wayne, and really the township as a whole is going to be undertaken as part of the comprehensive plan, and then more specifically to downtown Wayne with the master plan study. Those are going to provide some recommendations as to then how we modify and update the zoning code when we get to that after the comprehensive plan is updated. So we don't know anecdotally if there is a parking issue or not. You hear about it, but we also only have our meter lots up till 6 p.m. After that, it's free parking. So we don't really have a matrix to determine what is the available parking, what is the parking utilization down in Wayne on evenings and on weekends. There are sometimes people are just circling, looking for a spot close when there is an entire South Wayne parking lot that may be, at half its capacity. So we feel, and I believe the commissioners think that there is available parking. I'm not speaking for the commissioners, but just anecdotally, there seems like there could be available parking to meet these needs for any expansions of use and provide the amount of parking needed for reasonable development within Wayne.
Mr. Kocianski, could you speak to the to the last parking study that was done in the early 2000s?
I can't.
Okay, got it. I'm just curious as to what the findings were at that time, because that's clearly the best and last parking study that we've done in the WBOD.
One thing that I can talk to a little bit, in preparation for a restaurant that we thought was going to need some relief recently for a minor expansion, every restaurant or any applicant coming in front of the zoning hearing board has to include any previous relief. I pulled the file and I'm looking at previous relief, and there was an exhibit that was provided outlining various variances that were requested over the years in Wayne. And just for restaurants alone, this doesn't include retail or carry-out facilities, there were 22 variances that were requested. Now, some of those date back to 1978, which you could argue, oh, well, that's so long ago, but it also then sets that this has been an ongoing issue in the downtown area of the township where you don't have the ability to provide additional off-street parking. So it's a known issue that has been hanging out there for 30-plus years. So maybe the provision is a little bit burdensome on our businesses, and let's see if we can maybe free this up a little bit. We have this as a Band-Aid short term while we are updating the comprehensive plan. We're going to take a holistic approach to the review of this issue during the comprehensive plan as well as the Wayne master plan, and then develop long-term solutions to these issues in any possible zoning ordinance amendment and rewrite.
Mr. Kocianski, are you aware of any time when zoning relief has not been granted?
Not specifically, but looking at this list, and I don't know when it falls into the spectrum of time, but it looks like there may have been an appeal that was denied, and ultimately that the Commonwealth Court did overturn that, so it was appealed and granted the relief through some sort of court proceeding.
Got it. Thank you. Obviously, my concern is that, as you mentioned, we are in the midst of revising the Radnor Comprehensive Plan. We just got the grant for the Wayne Master Plan, and I feel like the zoning variance process, although burdensome and onerous, does provide a little bit of a check and balance. It does put businesses that have at least one parking spot, obviously, at a major disadvantage to businesses that don't have that. Commissioners, what questions do you have on this?
Well, I believe in democracy and parking, so I think this is a really good idea. I think I've heard it many, many times in my 38 years living here how many business people feel very burdened by our parking regs, and I think it drives some businesses out and it keeps others from coming in. So I wholly endorse this. I know I hate spot zoning, but in this case, I don't see the negative here. Like in a lot of spot zoning, there's negatives. In this one, I don't see it.
I'm not sure spot zoning. We're dealing with a larger area. Typically, spot zoning is affecting one parcel and treating that one parcel differently than the adjoining parcels. This is kind of the entire downtown area that this would be applicable to.
So I have a series of questions, and I'm glad that you brought up spot zoning. I have a concern about this. The map that was sent shows that this will apply to 3 distinct areas. Is that correct?
It's the entire Wayne Business Overlay District.
It's the entire WBOD?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not the special use district. We'll get to spot zoning in a minute when we
Okay, so
discuss
that's
that.
different. Okay, got it. I still feel like, why are we getting ahead of the process? I mean, earlier on this meeting, we talked about respecting the process. We just are going through a comprehensive plan. There's been a grant given to study the downtown that includes parking, among other things. So why are we getting ahead of that? Why can't this wait?
Commissioner Kunda?
Well, I was waiting to see if Commissioner Kim got his answer on that. Your question you just posed, why we're getting ahead, or why we're choosing to get ahead on just this.
I mean, one of the things to explain is I think actual changes coming out of this planning process literally might be 5 years from now. So I think this is something, these changes are made to correct problems that we are aware of now that need to be corrected, are not significant in the overall scheme of things. But to wait until we have the planning done is just to drag out the torture. So I think the thought here from the Board of Commissioners, from the staff, is here's a few things we know are problematic, were causing us issues, causing our residents issues. Let's try to take care of them in a quick fashion, recognizing that, when we finish the planning, we might have a different solution to this issue. But it's, we can always change it then. It's not like we change it once and we can't change it again. We certainly can.
Well, there's nothing so permanent as a temporary solution, it seems. But I had a couple of questions about the disadvantaged parcels that have one or more off-street parking. Would there be any mechanism or contemplated or planned that you could give your parking space to the township for a meter location and then opt out of the parking requirements?
I have no idea. I
I
have no idea if that's contemplated, discussed, or anything like that, Skip. I think it certainly would create legally a bunch of issues as far as liability.
Well, with parkland, sometimes we take the land and sometimes we take the money.
Yes.
Maybe if there's a fee for parking and you're willing to dedicate the space for a charging station or a handicap location, an additional one, there's probably not enough handicap locations. That would be a possible solution that would take away the disadvantage of having your one or two dedicated parking spaces. I also had a question about, staying on that topic, if you consolidate two lots and one of the lot has dedicated parking, the other one doesn't, which one controls if you need to combine the two lots for purposes of a project?
That would be something you'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, but if you combine two lots and there's parking on one of them, now the combined lot has parking, so you would treat it as if it has parking, I would think.
Or you could treat it as if it didn't have parking.
Like I said, you have to deal with this on a case-by-case basis, but if you can provide parking and you're actively avoiding it, that's not the way this works.
But it might be necessary to create the size of the project to have it come to fruition. Also, we could decide in terms of this ordinance which way we wanted to go. In terms of a lot consolidation issue as it comes up, we could jump the issue to front and center and deal with it now.
Skip, in I think that case, you would be increasing the nonconformity, and you wouldn't be allowed to increase a nonconformity by eliminating parking.
It's not a nonconformity after our new ordinance passes.
Well, no, there's still an underlying parking requirement, so if parking exists and you're consolidating two lots, one with parking, one without, the new lot still has parking, because parking existed. You just made that lot bigger. You couldn't then eliminate that because you'd be increasing the nonconformity. And you also mentioned, fee in lieu for park and recreation land. I think state law is very clear as to things that zoning ordinances can do and other ordinances outside of that where you can do fees in lieu of.
Just looking.
Any other commissioner thoughts, comments?
I just add my 2 cents that I don't see it as a problem of getting ahead of ourselves if we're being proactive and addressing known issues. And instead of waiting, as we say, 5, if we're lucky, years for the new plan. I mean, I almost think that's optimistic that this will be resolved within 5 years. So I'm all for being proactive in this manner. The way it's been explained makes sense to me.
So I think what's troubling me with this potential ordinance amendment is that if you examine the, I guess, 2003 comprehensive plan, and you look specifically towards parking facilities, it talks about a parking structure in 2003. And that's a serious problem. We haven't had a parking study in 20 years. We're on the brink of having one now. And I'm not saying that, I get that it might take 5 years to do a consolidated rewrite of our code, but this is something that could be done through an ordinance amendment such as this after we take a look at some of these studies. And I do think that a process exists for us to re-examine it, but we also have a lot more developments that are happening or requests for variances from lots that have parking. Now, granted, in my short time of being on this body, we have always granted a recommendation for zoning hearing board to approve a variance on parking. But if you look at the cases that we examined, in all cases, either the development was self-contained, in other words, there was no risk in spillover to the adjacent neighborhoods, but also if that was not the case, I think 150 to 168 East Lancaster Avenue comes up as one where we were able to save parking and actually increase the amount of parking that development had. So it was a net gain or no net loss, certainly, and no impact on public parking in the community. So that's why I feel strongly that we can wait. We don't have to wait 5 years, but while we examine the data from many of our studies, I'd also like to hear from, I know the commissioners want to move quickly, but I don't think that it hurts to wait.
And I think that those are fair and valid concerns, and I think that those should be expressed to the commissioners if you were to give a recommendation. A couple things you mentioned, the 168 Lancaster Avenue, that would fall under Provision B, which would require them to provide off-street parking for the expansion. So those types of developments where they're going to scrape the site and fully redevelop it, that would be considered, a new development, and it would be required to provide the parking per the code. Spillover parking, we've heard anecdotally that the existing parking lots are underutilized. So the opportunity for somebody to park in a neighborhood, walk past those underutilized parking lots to get to Wayne, they would just park closer and park in those lots. So, again, we agree that there's more studying that needs to be done. This is just something that staff feels is a good fix until we can get to those studies and complete the comprehensive plan, because a study alone is not going to tell us the whole story. It's the study with the comprehensive plan with anecdotal historical information in terms of how these things keep coming up over and over and over again. So if these requests are coming to the board and you're not making any recommendations to not approve those, and they're going to the zoning hearing board, and the zoning hearing board is granting them, and they keep coming up, there's an issue with the code. So let's fix that in the short term. Long term, we have the planning studies underway, more to be completed, and then a comprehensive rewrite. But again, your concerns are fair and valid, and I think that that's something that the commissioners would want to hear.
One other concern I have is the temporary situation, I think still temporary, of SEPTA lots being underutilized by SEPTA riders. And I think the lunch crowd in Wayne uses the SEPTA lot to some extent.
And that could be, and that's, a SEPTA enforcement issue. But are the people that are parking in that, maybe for the lunch crowd, are they not parking in the lots because there's available spaces in our lots are further away, and they just want to park closer because they see it?
I have a question about that. SEPTA, at the moment, I think, is not charging for their spots at all. And there's an indefinite...
Next month or so.
There was an indefinite waiver, depending on when the study is being done for the new plan, it might be flawed in that respect. But, no, I just missed my train of thought on that. I wanted to, if it comes back to me, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, so, Mr. Golis, I think you can shed some light on the SEPTA plans.
I'm not really aware, except, are they going to start charging?
Yes, they're going to start charging. This was announced today.
That was my question.
In the beginning of their fiscal year, which I believe begins on July 1st.
There are numbers in the lot, but their numbers are not township numbers, they're not parking meter numbers, or they are. To the extent that you're not having a SEPTA tag on your mirror. When you pull into the SEPTA lot, there are a series of numbers in the painted for each spot, just like on-street parking. Are they purely SEPTA numbers, or are they township numbers so that you can charge?
I think they're purely SEPTA because the township has meters on spaces in those lots.
That's correct. So the township has its spaces that are numbered in our parking authority addresses, and the two do not mix.
Okay.
So I want to come back to this a little bit later when we take a vote or a temperature check. Does anybody have any thoughts as to Section 2B with the parking spaces for new or redeveloped buildings, that they can be located? This is a language change, right, Mr. Kuchansky? It adds new or redeveloped. We don't have a full red line on this?
Correct. The new and redeveloped that's how we had to differentiate between, an expansion of an existing use versus, the 168 where it's a scrape and rebuild.
Okay.
And that language is consistent, and that terminology is consistent throughout the WBOD where it talks about new and redeveloped.
Does anybody have any thoughts, questions about that before we move on? All right. Section 3. So this is special use area related. Section 280-5317 of the code, subsection B. This adds an additional factor for the BOC to consider when approving conditional use. Any thoughts or questions, commissioners, on this one? Mr. Kuchansky, could you just give us a little bit of color on that one? What's the special factor?
I'm actually going to look to Peter on this. This was something that I believe was part of the conditional use factors that was creating some concerns as to how the developers were applying things.
Before we actually talk about that, since we are in the special use sections, special use areas, can we back away from that and just get a little bit of context of why these special use areas were created within WBOD? Maybe somebody can give us some history about that.
I don't have the history. Obviously the WBOD provisions are not that old, but I was not here at the township when that was created, so I don't really have any insight other than looking at those are generally in municipal use areas of the township. So you have the library, you have the parking areas, the North Wayne lot, and whatnot.
Okay, so just for our audience of 30 to 50 folks who may be watching, the three special use areas: North Wayne Municipal Lot. This is the Wayne train station. abutting the SEPTA parking lot, the South Wayne Municipal Lot, Post Office, and the Bellevue Park and Walk, or the otherwise known as the AT&T parking lot, right? So those are the three special use areas that we're talking about tonight. Any comments on the additional factor from staff?
This is really, hold on 2 seconds, please.
Sure.
So nothing's changing. I believe what happened here is in handling a special or a conditional use for one of these special areas, the Board of Commissioners and Mr. Rice realized that they were missing some language to hang their hat on, and that's why they added this. So there's nothing of substance here. There's nothing that we're changing specifically. It's more of a procedural change to make sure that if and when we ever have another one of these applications, the board has a better control over what type of conditions they can attach to any approval of that for that application.
Okay. Everybody good? Okay, let's move on. Okay, so section 4, again, special use areas, which changes the building height and setback requirements in those three special use areas: North Wayne Municipal Lot, Wayne Train Station, South Wayne Municipal Lot, Post Office, Bellevue Park and Walk, AT&T parking lot. Just a couple of questions. Mr. Norsini, any plans to redevelop the South Wayne lot at this time?
The township spent approximately $3 million for a stormwater management system on that lot, so not speaking for the board, I would anticipate the answer is no.
Okay, so the guess is no. All right, Mr. Norsini, next question. The Bellevue Park and Walk, AKA the AT&T parking lot, is that the 60 West project? Is that going to happen? I know they received conditional use.
Yeah, so they received conditional use, now they have to go through the process.
Okay.
And as part of that, the lot on West Avenue will become municipal parking, a trade-off, if you will.
Okay, gotcha. So, and that parking lot, is that a special use area? So that will become the special use area, right? That's what you just said?
No, I said that we would be receiving the existing AT&T parking lot on West Avenue in lieu of the parking lot at AT&T. I don't know about the special use area.
So there's no contemplation that the special use area is going to be moving. In other words, the expectation is that if 60 West goes through the development process, that lot will be developed, correct?
The lot, the AT&T lot, the current lot that we use, yes.
Correct. Okay, so the only remaining lot that we're talking about, and conceivably the South Wayne lot could qualify if somebody's going to develop it. The only remaining lot, we're talking about the North Wayne train station lot, special use area that is not going to be developed.
So you're talking about the lot off of North Wayne that the Presbyterian Church owns a large portion of?
Correct.
Again, I can't speak to that, Mr. Fruman.
Mm-hmm. So the point I'm trying to make here, and this is a different question, but doesn't this kind of reek of spot zoning to a certain extent? I mean, we're relegated to just one area, right? And this is the setback requirements, the maximum impervious coverage, they're all to deal with one particular parcel. Is that correct?
No, not from a spot zoning analysis.
Okay. Can you explain?
Yes, because spot zoning doesn't look at, well, this is already developed, it's never going to be developed again. Spot zoning looks at, more practically speaking, the size of the land that's being rezoned. So, and that is on a case-by-case basis. There's no bright and fast rule, oh, it has to be X number of acres or else you're doing spot zoning. So, and, as far as the law is concerned, it looks at any of these areas could be possibly redeveloped. And, looking at, just take the south parking lot. If someone throws at the township enough money to redevelop it, they're going to say, well, you pay, you reimburse us the $3 million we already spent on it, and we have a deal. In most townships, to be honest, this would be a kind of funny exercise. In Radnor and Wayne especially, it's not beyond reason to think, okay, someone's going to come in here and throw a ridiculous amount of money to get some land. So I think this is actually a great example of why the law doesn't kind of go into this minute analysis as, well, this one can't be developed and I don't see this one. No, they just look at it, okay, how many parcels are involved? It's a much broader, higher level look than what you just went into, the minutia. So could we be facing a spot zoning challenge? Possibly, yes. But I don't think what's happening right now is actually spot zoning. The spot zoning occurred when we created the special use areas back whenever we created them. If we haven't had problems yet, we're probably not going to have problems in the future because of these changes.
Fair enough. Okay. Very good. My question, so when we look at the changes, and you look at the requirements of the WBOD at this point, they're significantly different. And they were significantly different prior to the changes. Sure, we're decreasing the maximum height, right? Which is more in line with the WBOD. But now we have side and rear yard setback increases. We have a decrease in the maximum impervious coverage to 75%, where WBOD allows for 100% impervious coverage. I'm concerned that we're creating these islands that look nothing like the zoning district that surrounds it. Mr. Kochansky, do you have some thoughts here?
No, I don't know how to comment on that.
Commissioners?
Well, so what's the rationale for 90% impervious? I mean 75% impervious over the 90 that's there now, given that these areas are they're not parkland.
If there's a decrease in impervious, and I don't know, the commissioners kind of drove some of these and worked with John's office on these changes, but if there's a decrease in the amount of impervious coverage, and the township just spent $3 million on a stormwater management system, kind of goes hand in hand with maybe trying to reduce the stormwater effects and potential flooding in Wayne.
So Steve, that sounds like a rational reason to throw that number down. Is that good effect going to happen because we go from 90 to 75?
So I have to agree with Mr. Koshansky. I don't know the genesis for that, but I know in general, reduced impervious in an area that is highly impervious would be a benefit. In general, anecdotal terms.
I'll accept that. The setback issue is, I'm trying to get my arms around it because like the CVS, the older CVS, has a huge setback in the front, and compared to like other places on the strip. And I feel like if you're a shopper that you don't want that. You don't want that big parking lot in front of the business. You want a really nice sidewalk that can fit 2 or 3 people, and they can look in the store windows as they're walking, and it's just an easier transition into the store. It seems like this big 50-foot setback in the WBOD doesn't make sense to me, but, you know, it's because it's not consistent. I don't know how to like wrap my arms around it. Like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, why? Like, what's the rationale here? Who's pushing this? Like, what's the impetus for this? It's like nobody's explaining why 50-foot, you know, you would think that somebody would say, well, it's 50 feet because these are the benefits of 50 feet. But all I'm looking at is a bunch of numbers, different numbers and ratios. And I'm like, what is this? What am I supposed to vote on here? Like, or how am I supposed to vote?
In terms of the CVS building, you had, you know, pre-existing buildings that existed prior to the WBOD being created. So those buildings were probably built at a time where they met setback requirements. However, the WBOD has provisions when you tear down a building and rebuild it, those setbacks now that new building now needs to be more in line with the existing street facade, so it addresses those types of issues. So any type of redevelopment, you're going to start bringing those buildings that are set way back, which was appropriate back in the day, but as towns evolve and codes evolve, it's not as appropriate today, and it doesn't create the nice streetscape that you're trying to envision. So now it's like, okay, now bring those forward so that you create a more unified street front. And I believe that the setback you're referencing doesn't measure, and I have to look at the code specifically, but I recall it being measured from the center line of the road and not from the right-of-way. So, you know, when you typically see street setbacks, it's from the right-of-way, an additional 50 feet. That's a lot different than 50 feet from the center line of the road, because then you have, and Steve may know the cartway width of Lancaster Avenue, but you're probably close to 30 feet or so of that from the center line of the road over, 20, 25 feet. So that 50 feet is not really a 50 foot off the right-of-way. It's closer to 15 to 20, maybe 25 feet, which allows you to get that wider sidewalk in there and some landscaping to soften the facade and create a nicer street front.
So what this is doing is making the user experience more pleasant.
It's not making anything, it's allowing for the redevelopment. If, you know, as lots come in, it's now going to start to allow that to be created. So, you know, any provision doesn't mandate these things be done, but it sets the stage for if it's going to be redeveloped, it's now going to start creating a more unified streetscape.
So if you look at the built-to-line standards in the WBOD, and there's several. You have certain areas that have a 15-foot setback from center line of the road. You have some that are 45, 25, 35, up to 60. And these special use areas are all different and in different parts of the WBOD. So my concern here is that by creating one setback requirement for all of them, you may be creating build-to-line standards that are not congruent with the surrounding buildings. Can you give us any context on why 50 feet was used?
I don't know the specifics. Again, that was something that John Rice's office worked with the commissioners on developing those standards. I don't know the genesis of where they came from, but you'll find throughout that there are provisions in this code that are very antiquated. And, you know, again, these are just Band-Aids to get us through some issues that we see. You know, maybe a project's come in and we said, you know what, we can't do anything about it. It's been submitted under the code, but we don't want this to happen again. So let's fix it now. Create a Band-Aid while we take then the time to pause and then look at it once the comprehensive plan is done, once the master plan is done. But, you know, we don't have the time and the ability to do a whole comprehensive rewrite now. Let's put a stopgap in order and then drop back, punt, wait, analysis, look at it as a whole, and then develop a new code.
Got it, thank you. Mr. Norsini, just to go back on impervious, you worked on the South Wayne parking lot. What's the impervious coverage there at this point?
At the South Wayne lot itself,
Yes.
I don't, too many projects to go. I don't have that exact number. The impervious of the South Wayne lot was reduced because we put in parking islands with plants, and I got to shout out to Mr. Golis because he did the landscape design there, which was very nice. It is reduced. So that parking lot not only manages, the system under that parking lot not only manages the parking lot, which never was, but it also manages South Wayne Avenue and the adjacent road in a 10-year, 1-hour event.
Is it possible that you could be creating a nonconformity there by putting a 75% impervious requirement there through this change?
You mean at the parking lot itself?
Right.
Again,
I
without
mean,
the-
we don't know the actual number,
Yeah,
right?
I don't know the numbers, and I would not want to hazard a guess.
No. I'm concerned that we are. That's where I'm going with that. Mr. Kim.
Chairman, I'm all for Band-Aid approach, but I don't think these are the right Band-Aids. So I'm not sure this is having any effect.
Got it. I think we owe it to the Board of Commissioners to go through all the sections, and then I think we'll just take a vote or a temperature check of what we feel. Anything else on the on Amendment 4, Commissioners? Okay. Amendment, Section 5. This is the one that adds additional requirement for conditional use applicants only. It requires them to prove out sufficient sewer capacity prior to getting the project approved. Mr. Norsini, just give us a brief overview why we'd like to see that, what the current application submission process looks like, just for the sake of our audience. Where does the current sewer capacity come up in the current application flow, and how does the proposed change actually impact developers? More burdensome, less burdensome?
So I will be brief, but I would like to start with the 1945 Municipal Authorities Act, and no, just kidding. So any land development that comes in, I am going to try to be brief, but I got to give you a little context. So the sewage from Radnor Township goes through several other entities to end up at the Southwest Philadelphia Treatment Plant. One of those entities is currently under a CMP or Connection Management Plan. That would be Delaware County Joint Authority, or DCGAA. So at this point in time, any requirement for additional sewage capacity other than a failed on-site system triggers that. That means 1 or 2 equivalent dwelling units. But really what this is addressing, it's just pointing out something that has been required. So what it's saying is, all applications shall submit approvals and/or documenting evidencing sufficient sanitary sewer capacity. That's what occurs in a sewage facilities planning module. That is what that process is. And what it's saying is, you need to do this and get it started and get it completed early on in your project, right? So again, it is a requirement. It is an outside agency requirement we talk about all the time. That's one of them. And that's really what it's doing. It's bringing to light. It doesn't say sewage facilities planning module, but that's one of the items a sewage facility planning module requires. It says, do we have enough sanitary sewer capacity? That's Radnor, that's RHM, that's DCGAA, That's Delcora and that's Southwest Philadelphia Treatment Plant. That's what that's saying. It is important. I am a broken record in telling developers this, but it is good to see it in ordinance.
Okay, sounds great. With respect to proving out sewage facilities as a requirement of the submission of the plans, are you adding additional cost burden? So let's say you have an applicant that's looking for a variance, as well as litany of other things. Does it impose more cost onto them to go through the sewage approval process, not knowing whether they're going to get a variance for their project?
So my recommendation to all applicants is to do just that.
Mm-hmm.
It is a long process because of that connection management plan. I don't feel that it's going to add, I think if a developer has done their due diligence, and part of that due diligence is talking to staff, and that's where we talk about this. If they've done their due diligence and their intent on moving forward, I do not believe this is going to be a burden to them. I believe it's something the prudent developers will already have started and are moving forward on, or at least they should.
Mr. Chairman, I could also add in, you mentioned the variance. This provision's under the conditional use section, so an applicant needing to get a variance is not obstructed or delayed any way, shape, or form by this provision. That is a separate tract that can run parallel, and generally would be, a variance would be required before they would, get land development approval. So they could run their variance and their conditional use applications together concurrently then with any kind of sewage planning facilities.
I knew that. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. It's been a long night, probably self-imposed. Commissioners, any questions on Section 5? Okay. Section 6. This is a landowner who files a conditional use application essentially cannot have two conditional use applications out there. Commissioners, any questions on this? Common sense? All right. Section 7. This is the additional time to obtain a building permit, going from 6 months to 12 months. Mr. Kurchansky.
Sure. This issue has come up. It was actually raised at zoning hearing board, I believe, 2 months ago, where the board is hearing routine extensions for a variety of reasons, whether it's because they have to get the variance and then go through the land development process, and any application that has to do both is not getting through land development in 6 months. So they're seeing repeated requests from different applicants and sometimes multiple requests from the same applicant because they have to get through land development, which could be 12 to plus months to get through that. And then they're running into sewage capacity issues. So they're there 3, 4, 5 times. And zoning hearing board came to me and said, is there something that we can do with this? So we discussed that at a meeting and said, going out beyond 12 months seemed a little bit too much of a stretch. They didn't want to just kind of grant this blanket, extension of time. But they also felt that 6 months was just not enough time for, in between. So they thought 12 months was a good in between time frame. But there's still that provision in there for 6 months that once a permit has been issued, you have to start. So it's just there's been a delay. It's been occurring for years. Where these projects have to keep coming back. I think there was one project that was back 8 or 9 times for these extensions because it just the sewage capacity was not there, and they needed to get this extension. And if you don't get the extension, then your relief has then become voided, and you have to start that process all over again. So this was kind of at the request and in consultation with the zoning hearing board.
Commissioners, any comments, questions? All right. So. Let's hear from the public. Hearing none. So just keeping track of where we are in this, we didn't have a vigorous debate on Section 1, Section 3, Section 6, nor Section 7 of the amendments. We did have vigorous discussion on Section 2A, which deals with on-street and off-street parking and loading requirements. And we did have vigorous discussion on Section 4 regarding special use areas, changing the height, setback, coverage, and parking regulations. I'm sorry, Section 5 as well. We didn't have any discussion that has to do with sufficient sewer capacity. So, Solicitor, how would you like us to dispense on this? Shall we vote to approve the ones that we didn't have discussion on?
I mean, you could do a motion where you say, someone moves to recommend approval of sections, I think, 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, and recommends denial or amendment of the others. And if you want to put comments in why you think the others should be denied, or not, or properly say not enacted or amended in some way, you could certainly add those comments to the motion. If that's going to be too complicated, vote to recommend approval of the 5 you have no comment on, and then you could do a separate motion on the 2 you do have a comment on.
I do think the latter is probably the cleaner approach. So I'm going to make a motion to, in the matter of ordinance number 2024-04, I'm going to make a motion to recommend approval of Section 1, Section 3, Section 5, Section 6, and Section 7. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, second by Brubaker. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous on those sections. Let's do a motion on Section 2. So in the matter of ordinance number 2024-04, I'd like to make a motion to not recommend approval, Section 2. Can I get a second on that? Second by Kim. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Kim, Fruman, Lahota, and Kunda vote not to recommend. Let's have a. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Possible that we have different reasons. I kind of like the idea of just 2A and stop there, for example.
With me, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. I think we can do this again, and we don't have to wait 5 years. There's enough parking, there's time enough for a parking study, as well as comprehensive plan, look at this. And I also think that we should probably hear from the public on this change as well. Okay. Any other comments, commissioners? Or did we capture that? All right.
I think we got it.
Okay. Section 4. This is the section on special use areas, changing the height, setback, coverage, and parking regulations within those areas. I'd like to make a motion to recommend not to approve that amendment. Can I get a second? Second by Golis. All in favor of not recommending approval for Section 4?
Aye.
Okay. Kim, Golis, Fruman, Kunda, and Lahota, and with Brubaker voting nay. Got it. Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you want to state the reasons for not recommending approval? I,
I don't think these height setback coverage parking regulations actually has any effect in terms of consistency of urban design, street wall, placemaking, and a greater vision for the downtown.
anybody else?
I agree with Commissioner Kim. Yeah, I agree with that.
I as well. Okay. I think we're done with this. Okay. Radnor Conservancy is here, patiently waiting. Thank you for your patience. You're going to educate us tonight on building codes to prevent bird strikes. Please come up. And thanks again for your patience.
That's quite all right. Is this on? Yes, it is. My name is Phil Whitmer. I'm the Vice President of Birdtown, Pennsylvania. We work with municipalities to add the voice of birds to that municipality, and that often means recommending native plants and providing bird-safe activities and facilities. And so we work with Radnor Conservancy as a partner in many projects. And if you give me a second to get this going. There we go. My purpose tonight is to sort of scratch the surface and hopefully pique your curiosity about what goes into planning for birds, in particular the building codes and what can happen in bad situations. So this is something that's relatively new. There's not a lot that's been done on it before, but I will give you some indication about what kinds of municipalities are doing things about building codes. And I've also left some information with Patricia that can be posted. But let me start by just telling you a little bit about why should we care about birds. And I love birds because they're beautiful. They're certainly good for my mental health, and you know, evidence is that they're good for a lot of people's mental health. They're amazing creatures that we can learn from. For instance, we have in this area the ruby-throated hummingbird, very small, weighs like a couple of pennies or something like that. And that bird flies nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico when it migrates. I mean, that's amazing. How does that bird do that? And when we figure that out, I think that will be valuable for all of us to know. But also, birds provide us with ecological services that many times we take for granted, but we need to start thinking about. So what would happen if we didn't have birds anymore to help us control insect populations? Well, we'd start using more pesticides, and that creates this vicious cycle of the more pesticides we put out, the fewer insects we have, the fewer birds we have, and we run the risk of the whole system collapsing. Birds also pollinate plants. They control vermin, and they disperse seeds. There's a story about the blue jay being responsible for our oak forests. And the reason for that is that blue jays like to stash extra acorns, and they will stash them in the ground, but they don't remember where all of them are, or maybe they don't need all of them during the winter. So the next spring, there are more oak trees starting because of that dispersal. We have a problem with buildings and birds. And the scope of the problem with birds is such that we really need to address this problem. Since 1970, in this country, we've lost 29% of the land birds in those 50 years. That's a huge toll, and there are other studies that show that there are dramatic declines in a lot of bird species. It's not universal across all of the species. Woodpeckers, for instance, are doing fairly well, but a wood thrush, which is Pennsylvania, is the site for a major portion of the breeding of the wood thrush, has a beautiful song, but its population in Pennsylvania has declined by 65% in those 55 years, or 50 years rather. Now, what does that have to do with buildings? Well, the bird mortality resulting from window collisions in the United States is estimated to be between 365 and 988 million birds. That's per year, and this study was done in 2014. And so current estimates are between 1 billion and 1.5 billion birds a year are lost to collisions with buildings. And if you look at my highlighted area, you'll see that 56% of collision mortality occurs at low-rise and that's low-rise buildings, 4 to 11 stories. 44% at urban and rural residents, and only less than 1% of collisions are from high-rises. And so you may be familiar and have heard about instances. The most recent was at McCormick Place in Chicago, where 1,000 birds died in one night at that single building. In Philadelphia, it happened, I think it was 2019 or 2020. There was a situation where it was a foggy night, all of the city lights were on, and the next morning, they found approximately 1,500 dead birds in downtown Philadelphia. Those don't happen all the time, but they get a lot of press, and so we think naturally, oh, well, that's where most of the collisions occur, whereas actually they occur in places like Radnor Township. Now, this is a picture of a Chinese farmer who is hand pollinating, I think they are pear trees. And the reason that he's doing that is because there aren't enough birds and insects to pollinate it on their own. And so that's the danger that we face from using more and more pesticides and from eliminating bird populations. Incidentally, there's a dependency between insects and bird populations because many birds depend on insects for their own food, but 95% of our birds in our land birds here require insects to feed their young, so that even though they may spend most of their life eating seeds and berries, they're using insects to feed their young until they're old enough to eat adult food. So why is this happening? Birds have pretty good vision, but they can't see glass. And to tell you the truth, we can't see glass either, but we use cues like the frame of a window or the frame of a door or lettering on the glass that tells us there's something solid there, there's glass there, but the bird doesn't have that frame of reference. What they see is a reflection of vegetation, or they see vegetation on the other side of a window, either a plant in the building or on where they have two window frames that they're two sheets of glass rather that come together and form a corner, and you can see through the corner to the other side. So the other thing to know about glass is that it's an equal opportunity killer. And that is, as evolution goes, the weaker birds, the slower birds, they fall victim to predators. But since birds have evolved for thousands and even millions of years, they haven't evolved to deal with glass because that's a relatively new thing. And so glass kills healthy birds as well as all the others. And you can see this is a picture of, a day's find at some location, that's a particularly heavy kill that day. But there are lots of different species in there of lots of wonderful birds. And it affects birds of all size. And I just thought I would share with you, this is a pileated woodpecker. We have them in Radnor. I've seen a mating pair at the Willows. They're gorgeous birds. It's our largest woodpecker. That is, if the ivory-billed woodpecker really is extinct. And I believe that it is, but that's sort of a joke. Now, so what I'm going to show you here is a bird strike. And the bird strike itself happens pretty quickly. Okay, so this was a pileated woodpecker down here in this corner, right here, and you can see that bird is pretty badly stunned. You probably didn't notice that there's a hawk that flew into a feeding station over here and frightened the pileated. It was, running for its life. But this bird is so badly stunned that it may not survive. Even birds that strike glass and are stunned but manage to fly off, they often are so badly injured that they can't recover. Now, there's a compounding factor in our modern urban areas, and that's the factor of light and light pollution. It's a double whammy for the birds. We have a lot of birds that migrate great distances, sometimes thousands of miles from South America up to the boreal forests, but they pass through our area. Some of them come and wind up breeding in our area. Some of them just keep on going another 500 or 600 miles. And I don't know how many of you have ever experienced this, but this is what a night sky looks like when there's no light pollution. If I go out in my backyard, even on a clear night, I can see, 10 stars maybe. Well, why is that? That's because we're in the northeast corridor that is so badly lit up that you can't pick out any of these smaller stars. And that's how birds evolved. What the birds face now is this. Cities that are lit up And the blue spectrum of light refracts at a much greater degree than other frequencies. And so that's why the sky is blue. But that's the kind of light that colder, more toward the blue spectrum light is what we're using to light our cities. And you can see in the background toward the horizon, there's just a glow there. Now, how does that impact birds? Birds migrated under and evolved under the first scenario where you could see all the stars, and they used the stars and the position of the sun and the moon to migrate. That also, they're very interesting. Birds can see the magnetic field. At least most of those birds that are migrating are also using the ability to see the magnetic field to help guide them on their way. But what happens in these tremendously overlit situations is that the birds get trapped. This is the memorial tribute in New York City, the memorial to 9/11. And so if you look at those columns of light into the air, you can see all these little dots in there. Those dots are birds that are getting trapped in the light. And so they may fly around in circles until they're exhausted, and sometimes will collapse and die simply from exhaustion. What they do now is they have monitors that watch those beams, and when too many birds get trapped, they will shut the lights off for 15 minutes. The birds will reorient themselves and fly on, and then they can turn the lights back on and wait till there's another group that are similarly trapped. Solutions do exist. This is Penn Medicine at Radnor, and one of the things that they've done, they have a garden toward the back of the hospital, and the building is sort of U-shaped around that garden. And so what they did is put film on the windows that allow the birds to see those windows. Even though there is a reflection of vegetation in there, the dots there are significant enough that it greatly reduces the window strikes. And this is what it looks like from inside. And so you can tell, yes, you can notice the dots, but pretty soon you won't even see them. You can see, the landscape and the outside very well. This is the building that's going up right next to Penn Medicine, and that's the Brandywine Realty Trust building. But I took two pictures on two facades of the building, and what do you see in the building? You see a tree. Birds are used to flying through very, very narrow, very small spaces. So a bird's not going to know that that's a glass wall there. They're just likely to fly toward that tree and then get cut short by the glass. This is a picture of...
Mr. Whitmer, sorry to interrupt, but with respect to the tree, if the tree reflection wasn't there, would that be less of a risk?
No, not if there's a reflection of the sky. So it's based on what the bird is perceiving. If it's black, or if the glass is frosted, and it might see little pieces of it, but they don't perceive the glass as being there. They think whatever is there is there.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And just as evidence that these solutions can work, this is a picture taken from inside a downtown cafe. And this cafe had 3 walls of glass, was a major bird killer. We monitor this spot, during migration in the fall and migration in the spring, and I don't think a day went by that they didn't find at least 1 or 2 birds there in a relatively small building. But you can see the dots that were applied to the exterior of the building. And since then, there haven't been any bird fatalities there. So it does work. This is just to demonstrate Philadelphia with its lights out. There's the lights out program runs on a voluntary basis for buildings to turn off their lights during migration in the fall and in the spring. And it has an impact on reducing the number of birds that get trapped, fall into the city, and then wind up hitting glass buildings. More appropriate to our neck of the woods, if you have to use light at night, which of course we do, and nobody's recommending that we stop using lights at night, but you can use full cutoff fixtures. In other words, they're directing all of the light down at a 45-degree angle, and using the warmer temperatures, so less than 3,000 Kelvin. And so what that does is cuts down on the refraction all over the place, and so it cuts down on the light going places where you don't really want it or need it. If all you're talking about at night is the light and you want to use light inside, you can use shades or curtains to block the light. A lot of bright lights affect insects as well. We're now in a period of great insect decline, which has an impact on birds as well. And those warmer lights and putting timers on lights so that the lights aren't there when you don't need them helps with insects and also with attracting birds. So, for instance, if you have floodlights at your house for safety reasons, you put them on a motion detector and a timer, so that when you need them, they go on. When you don't need them, they go off. So communities are beginning to set standards. One of the reasons that it's important for there to be some kind of legislation is that those of us who know about bird strikes and about ways to use bird-safe glass, we don't find out about buildings until they're already way down the line in the planning stages. Like I didn't know about the one building next to Penn Medicine until I started seeing it going up. And I can't know this, but I suspect it's going to kill a lot of birds. And so communities are beginning to set standards for bird-safe glass. And if those standards are there and builders know that they have to meet those requirements, they can, it costs them much less money. To go into a building that's already built downtown, or to go to these buildings in Radnor and have them retrofit is much more expensive than if that had been part of the planning phase and they had either put the retrofits in before the glass was installed or actually installed bird-safe glass. And there is bird-safe glass. Walker Glass, for instance, is one manufacturer who has several lines of bird-safe glass. It creates a pattern. The pattern can be etched on surface one. If you have a two-panel window, it has to be on the exterior surface, whatever you're treating it with, because that's where the reflection is. So if you put something in between the panes, or if you put something on the inside of the window, it might block or deter a bird from trying to fly through where they see a window on the other side, but it won't affect the reflection, and the reflection is one of the prime reasons they strike the glass. So I just wanted to show you that, excuse me. So Yale and the American Bird Conservancy, have worked together. They have this list of building policies that are in place, and you can see there are just a number of places that are starting to come up with legislation and building codes that build in bird-safe glass into the mix. Excuse me again, boy. And here, for instance, Madison will build with birds in mind. So usually most of this legislation is not legislation that's retroactive. It's not requiring that buildings or homeowners retrofit, but it usually goes in for any new construction. You have to use bird-safe materials. And that's pretty much what I have to say. I'd be interested in your comments on what you think the possibilities would be. For those of us who are concerned about this, what should we be doing here in Radnor or in Pennsylvania?
So I'm not a building code expert, but I know that our code relies heavily on the 2018 International Building Code to set standards for buildings, such as the one you cite, I assume. So just for context here, we intersected at the reason why you're here is because of 155 King Prussia Road. This is a building that's owned by Brandywine Realty. I think it's the Arkema or Arkema building that's already been approved and has gone through a pretty complex review process. However, given your presentation, potentially we're concerned.
Yeah.
The changes or the things that you recommend that are more bird friendly, and I took the liberty of taking notes here, are dots on glass. Obviously, the lights off program, full cutoff fixtures at night. It seems like the developers themselves to consider bird strikes, at the very least, a nuisance or a maintenance headache. Wouldn't they be interested in enacting some of these policies themselves?
Well, yeah, you would think so. One of the most, well, I get different opinions from different architects, but a lot of architects are aware that they can design with bird-safe glass, but if their customer is not asking for it, it is an additional expense. When you put that expense, and I'm not an expert on construction at all, or the expense of the glass, But when you put the additional cost for using bird-safe glass versus some other glass, since most modern constructions, they're going to put some kind of films on that glass anyhow for thermal protection. So compared to the total cost of the project, it's very small. But again, it's like we've run into the same thing with native plants and landscapers. It's like, well, yeah, sure, we know about native plants, but when our customers start asking for it, that's when we'll get more native plants. So it's got to start somewhere. And with the lights out, obviously, I would think that the energy that they're expending to keep those lights on all night long, just for whatever advertising benefit that might be, I would think that would be motivation. But it hasn't been that strong a motivator to this point.
Not to interrupt you, but.
No, it's okay.
I didn't want to not have an opportunity to ask. Is there any difference between LED lights and the traditional lighting in terms of impact on birds?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know LEDs are more flexible in terms of being able to control the temperature at which temperature meaning the temperature of the light. You know the megahertz or whatever. So. We're certainly not arguing against the LEDs because they are more flexible. They're going to last longer too.
People use plantation shutters in their homes and things like that. Are shutters, curtains, shades all desirable anti-bird strike measures? If you ask somebody, they won't tell you not to do that because it may have some effect. But what you have to do is go outside and look at your window when the sun's shining on it. And even if you have shades on the inside, the light's still reflecting off of surface one. That's the surface on the outside. There are some, for homeowners, there are some low-cost kinds of things that you can do. One is to install full screens because the screen is actually a pretty good protector. So not only does it reduce the reflection, but if a bird should happen to hit it, it usually can bounce off of it and not do that, full stop with all of that momentum being translated into bird injury. Other things you can do is, do paintings on the outsides of your windows. You can put decals on your windows. I don't recommend decals. A hawk shape?
Yeah, those aren't effective. I don't know if you've ever seen people put out a plastic owl, and after a couple of days you'll see birds perched on top of the plastic owl because I don't want to say they're not stupid, but they somehow realize that this owl isn't going to hurt them. And the sticker of a hawk, because I tried that once and it doesn't work.
Well, we have 2 feeders, and when the hawk is nearby, everybody stops eating and hides in the brush.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have a feeder, you guys will let me know when you've had enough. I can talk for a long time about this. When you have a feeder, they actually recommend that you put the feeder as close as you can to the window. Because if it's within 3 feet, then the bird doesn't build up enough momentum if it gets startled by a hawk or something like that. But, the reality is if a bird gets startled by a hawk, it'll fly into a brick wall. They're just trying to get out of the way. But the next best thing you need to do is in your yard, you need to provide cover for the birds. So you need to have bushes and shrubs and things like that, hopefully native because they, work in the system. But a bird that has some place to go and hide is much safer than one that's way out in the open. In the picture of the pileated, that feeder was way out in the open, and the hawk flew at the pileated, and it just, wasn't paying that much attention to where it was going, as long as it was away from the hawk.
So, a couple of things. Mr. Kochanski, what opportunities do we have, if any, to impact building standards?
So building standards for Pennsylvania are set by the state. So we adopt what the state adopts, and we have very limited ability to amend those state provisions. The process, there is a process, and you have to go through Harrisburg and petition them for any amendments to the building code. But that doesn't render our, our options useless, there are other options, probably a better way of saying that. Obviously, this board is one of the first bodies that sees land developments, so those topics can be raised there. Often feel that if you get ideas planted in developers' minds before they really start to commit design costs and construction costs, that they're going to be more willing to spend the extra dollars to make those improvements versus after materials have been ordered. As well as our design review board. They can address aesthetic issues far easier than getting an amendment to the building codes. So those would be the two bodies. Land development is going to come through you, but if you have a facade change and it doesn't involve land development, it wouldn't be in front of you, but it would be in front of our design review board. So those right now would just be recommendations from this body or from the design review board. Whether or not the developer would want to buy into that is, something is a different conversation. But to get our actual building codes changed would be at the state level.
Sure. The other options that we have, obviously, is as a planning commission, we can review ordinances with respect to street lighting and whatnot. I know Radnor very recently had undergone a program where we're replacing all of our street lights with LEDs, and special care was taken to look at the temperature, so to speak, of those lights. I'm not sure if birds were considered at the time, but when we re-examine ordinances that are related to light, we can certainly, now that we're educated, we can certainly take another look. In addition to that, we can recommend to you that we can certainly help with that. There's enough folks here that are connected in the township so that we can get the word out to the residents who can take measures at their own level, entirely voluntary, but certainly somebody who sees a lot of or experiences a lot of bird strikes, I think they would be highly motivated to do so.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll just add briefly that most of the scientists who are studying this assume that the estimates that they're coming up with are undercounts, because most people aren't aware of the bird strikes that are happening at their homes. If you take the number of residences that you have and you kill in the township and you kill one bird a year or two birds a year and you multiply that out, it winds up being a whole heck of a lot of birds. But predators like feral cats, raccoons, chipmunks, squirrels, they have learned to patrol underneath windows. They will take a carcass away in a flash. I was sitting in my kitchen, I heard a thump. This is with windows that were protected. I heard a thump. I said, that sounds like a bird strike. Took me about 20 seconds to get outside to look to see, and a chipmunk was already hauling off a warbler that had just hit my window. So, because of that, and because a lot of times they don't leave marks, sometimes they will, but a lot of times they don't leave marks, so people aren't aware of it. So, if you have a venue that you want me to speak at to make people more aware of the issue, I'll be glad to do that. And appreciate your help in getting the word out. And it sounds like while we work on the state building codes, you can suggest to builders that they use that standard. As long as you're finding out about it before they've completely planned and priced their project.
Yeah, I would think it'd be great if you did the same presentation to the Shade Tree Commission.
I'd be happy to.
And I can, if you have a card, I can forward that on to the chairman.
And the EAC also.
Yeah, the EAC, at least Marge Reinhardt, she was on the EAC. She's a member of PERG. So, yeah.
So, Mr. Whitmer, we wanted to thank you for your time today to educate us. We'll certainly begin to ask the questions of developers as plans come before us.
Yeah.
Now that we're a little bit more educated, we want to encourage you to spread the gospel, so to speak. And I do think that you're going to receive a willing ear. Even from folks who are not as passionate about birds as you are. So, with that being said, thank you again.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for your long night.
Yeah, and thanks for your patience.
That's okay.
With that being said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, I think Mr. Lahota seconded. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you, folks.